I couldn't breathe. Smoke clawed down my throat as I stumbled through what used to be my living room. The air shimmered with heat. Every memory I'd ever owned was turning to ash right in front of me. Flames crawled up the walls like living things, devouring photo frames, books, and the oak table my wife once loved. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, distant, useless. The fire didn't care. It had already won. I remember the crackle of timber splitting, the pop of glass imploding under the heat. I remember the way the floorboards burned my feet as I tried to reach the door. But mostly, I remember that sound, the sharp, almost musical snap of something collapsing behind me. It was the sound of my home dying. By the time I reached the yard, my lungs were begging for air. I dropped to my knees on the grass, gasping, eyes stinging from the smoke. The night sky glowed orange. Every neighbor light had turned on. Shadows gathered at the edge of their driveways, figures whispering, pointing, watching, and in the middle of them all, framed by the flickering light of the inferno, she stood, Karen, perfect posture, impeccably dressed even at midnight. She held a large, white umbrella above her head, as if she were afraid of getting a single raindrop or ash flake on her pristine robe. Her face wore that same smile she always had, kind on the surface, cruel underneath. "Oh my God, Judge Reynolds," she called out, clutching her chest. "Are you okay?" Her tone was honey, but her eyes watched the flames the way someone watches fireworks. I couldn't answer. I just stared at her through the haze. Every muscle in my body screamed that something wasn't right. She took a few careful steps closer, staying just out of reach. "It's such a tragedy," she said softly, "but maybe it's for the best. That old place was never really up to code, was it?" Her words sliced through the noise. I turned toward her, unable to speak, but I didn't need to. She already knew I knew. For a moment, we just stood there, the fire painting the night sky orange between us. Two people, one smiling, one broken. That was the night everything changed. When the firefighters arrived, it was already too late. My home was gone. The chief walked over to me, face grim, clipboard in hand. "We're sorry, sir. We couldn't save much. Could have been electrical, maybe the garage. We'll investigate." But I knew better. I had turned off the power before bed. The garage had no tools running, no chargers plugged in, nothing that could have sparked like that. This wasn't bad luck. It was intention. I looked over at Karen one last time. She was comforting one of the other neighbors now, her hand resting dramatically on their shoulder. But her gaze kept flicking back to me. Every time our eyes met, that smile twitched, like she couldn't hold it back anymore. That's when I promised myself, I will find out what you did in the days that followed. Lived out of a hotel room. The smell of smoke wouldn't leave. MIT clung to my hair, my clothes, my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw fire eating my memories alive. Reporters called it a tragic accident. The HOA newsletter even printed a message of condolence. Guess who wrote it? Karen Mitchell, HOA president. The note read, "We're deeply saddened by the unfortunate incident that destroyed one of our cherished homes. The HOA will review future renovation procedures to ensure neighborhood safety." Had the nerve to use my tragedy as a policy statement. I read that letter over and over again until the paper tore in my hands. You'd think I'd be used to manipulation. I'd seen it in court for years. I'd sentenced people for it, but this was personal. A week later, I went back to the property. The air still smelled like charred plastic. My front porch was nothing but splinters and twisted nails. I walked through what was left of the hallway. Crunching over debris, that's when I noticed something strange near the front steps. A small, round burn pattern in the grass, perfectly circular, darker than the rest. It didn't look like natural spread. It looked like something had been poured there. Gasoline. I froze. My pulse started hammering. But before I could think too long, I remembered the cameras. I had a few small outdoor security cams, nothing fancy, just motion sensors near the porch and driveway. I didn't think they'd survive the heat, but maybe, just maybe, the SD card did. I dug through what used to be the front corner post. Ash crumbling under my fingers until I found it, the melted remains of a small black camera. Wires still attached to the siding. The housing was gone, but the memory card slot was still visible. I pulled it out. The plastic edges were warped, but it was intact. I drove straight to a data recovery lab in town. The tech there, a kid no older than 25, looked skeptical. "If it's melted, chances are slim," he said. "Try," I told him. My voice came out low, but inside, I was on fire again. He did. 2 hours later, he came back out with a hard drive and wide eyes. "You might want to see this yourself." He played the footage. At first, it was just static and flickering light. Then movement. Someone walking across my driveway at 11:41 p.m., less than a minute before the fire started. The figure was wearing a long coat, hood up. The footage was grainy, but as the person moved under the porch light, the face turned. Just for a second, blonde hair, high cheekbones, a smile, Corinne. She was carrying something, a canister in one hand, a lighter in the other. I felt my chest tighten, my jaw locked. For a full minute, I couldn't speak. The tech looked at me. "You know her?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do." That night, I sat in my car with the laptop open, watching that clip again and again. The way she glanced over her shoulder, the calmness, the certainty. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't rage that hit me then. It was something colder. Focus. You see, when you spend years as a judge, you learn that revenge and justice aren't the same thing. But sometimes, they overlap just enough to make you dangerous. The next day, I made copies of the footage, one for the police, one for my lawyer, one for me. I didn't go to Karen directly, not yet. That would have been too easy. I wanted her to feel safe first. At the next HOA meeting, 2 weeks later, I walked in like nothing had happened. The community room was full of chatter neighbors, sipping lemonade, pretending not to stare. Karen was at the front table, adjusting her papers, wearing that same perfect smile. When she saw me, her expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise. Then the mask came back on. "Judge Reynolds," she said warmly. "I didn't expect to see you here so soon. I heard the insurance claim is being processed." "Almost done," I said. "Just tying up a few loose ends." She nodded, pretending sympathy. "That's good. It must be hard starting over." "Oh," I said, leaning forward just slightly. "You'd be surprised how fast things can change once the truth comes out." Her eyes narrowed for half a second. Then she laughed, a little too loudly. "Always the mysterious one, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. The next day, the police came knocking at her door. I wasn't there, but I heard later she acted shocked, appalled, insulted that anyone could suspect her. But when they mentioned security footage, her confidence cracked. She tried to play innocent. "She even called me later that night. Judge," she said softly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. You wouldn't really accuse me of something like this, would you? I've always admired you." Her voice trembled just enough to sound human. I let the silence stretch before answering. "Karen, I've seen people fake tears better than that in my courtroom." Click. That was the last time she tried to charm me. The investigation moved fast after that. The police found traces of accelerant near the garage, in the front lawn, the same type of fuel Karen had purchased a week before the fire, according to store surveillance. She denied everything, of course, said someone must have stolen her card. But the evidence didn't care about her story. When the arrest finally came, the whole neighborhood watched. She was still dressed perfectly, still smiling, waving off the cameras like it was some kind of misunderstanding. Even as the officers led her away, she looked up at my hotel balcony and said, "You'll regret this." But I didn't, because I knew something she didn't. My court schedule. And fate, or maybe justice, would bring her right back to me sooner than she could imagine. Months later, the morning of her sentencing, stood behind the bench, adjusting my robe. I'd recused myself from her trial, of course, but the system had a way of circling back. She was being sentenced on another charge, insurance fraud tied to the same investigation. The doors opened, and there she was again. Karen Mitchell. No makeup, no robe, no umbrella. Just a plain beige jumpsuit and a face. Drained of color, her eyes widened when she saw me sitting in the higher court's observation panel. For the first time, she didn't smile. I leaned back, watching quietly as the judge read her sentence. 3 years with no possibility of early release. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Not once, when they led her away. She turned to glance at me one last time, and I swear, for a second, that fake politeness returned, just a hint of that old smile. Twisted now, bitter and broken. But this time, I was the one smiling. Because justice doesn't always come fast. Sometimes it comes slow, deliberate, and perfectly timed. If you're still watching, this isn't just about revenge. It's about standing your ground when someone tries to destroy you. People like Karen hide behind charm, behind rules, behind masks. But the truth, no matter how long it takes, always burns brighter. So if you've ever been pushed down, made to feel small, or silenced by someone pretending to be nice, don't let them win. Stay till the end of every story. Truth finds its way out, always. And if you want more stories like this, real justice, real emotion, don't just scroll away, subscribe. Because next time, you'll see how another HOA tried to break someone else, and how it backfired in the most satisfying way possible. Asterisk, when the courtroom doors closed behind Karen, I thought it was over. Justice served. Case closed. But endings are rarely that simple. In the weeks after her sentencing, Willow Creek Estates changed in ways I didn't expect. The neighborhood that once pulsed with forced smiles and polished lawns now felt hollow. People avoided eye contact. Mailboxes stayed empty longer. Cars that used to glitter on Saturdays sat dusty on driveways. They weren't afraid of the fire anymore. They were afraid of what it revealed, that beneath all the perfect hedges and HOA meetings, this place was rotten. Karen had been its heart, and now that heart was gone. For me, peace didn't come easily. I kept replaying that footage in my mind, the frame of her face lit by my porch light, the flick of her wrist as she poured. The way she looked back once, as if daring the world to stop her. It should have felt like closure, but it didn't. Maybe because justice in a courtroom doesn't fix what's broken inside you. I tried to rebuild. Literally, insurance covered part of it. Not enough for what I'd lost, but enough to start. I bought the empty lot next door and decided to build something new, a smaller place. Simpler. No fancy porch, no garden statue for her to critique. Just walls, windows, and quiet. The construction crew worked through the fall. Every morning I'd bring them coffee, watch the frame rise against the gray sky, and think about how fragile everything really is. Sometimes I caught neighbors watching from their windows. They didn't wave anymore. Maybe they thought I'd bring more trouble. Maybe they were ashamed they hadn't stood up to her. Either way, silence suited me fine. One morning, while reviewing paperwork at a diner, a woman approached my table, Judge Reynolds. She was in her 40s, brown coat, nervous hands twisting a napkin. I recognized her face, Samantha Brooks, one of the quieter residents. She'd been at nearly every HOA meeting, but rarely spoke. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. I didn't know who else to talk to. I gestured for her to sit. "What's going on?" Her eyes darted around the diner before she leaned in. "You weren't the only one she went after." I raised an eyebrow. "She'll find me for keeping my mother's wheelchair ramp." Said it disrupted the visual flow of the street. When I refused to remove it, she threatened to foreclose my house over unpaid fees. My stomach tightened. "She had this file," Samantha continued. "A folder with everyone's information bank details, complaints, photos. She bragged about it at board meetings after you moved in. Said she had enough on every neighbor to make them comply." Now I sat back, processing her words. "Where is that folder now?" "I don't know. The board claimed they turned everything over to the interim president, but he says half the documents disappeared." The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but a different kind of heat spread through me. Karen might have been behind bars, but her poison was still in the soil. I thanked Samantha and promised to look into it. She left with a kind of relief that told me she'd been carrying that fear for years. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face, the exhaustion, the quiet gratitude. I'd spent my life believing the law was enough to keep order. But here, in this small suburban bubble, power had worn a friendly face, and no one questioned it. Maybe that's what frightened me most. 2 days later, I visited the temporary HOA office. It used to be Karen's Prita, renovated guest house filled with binders, plaques, and that ridiculous community excellence banner she'd made. Now it was dusty, half empty. The interim president, Gary Hughes, greeted me with a handshake that tried too hard. "Judge, I didn't expect how can we help you?" "I'm looking for any records Karen kept. Complaints, fines, property assessments, everything," he frowned. "We already gave the police her files related to the fire, not asking about the fire." His jaw tightened. He knew exactly what I meant. "Look," he said quietly, glancing toward the door, "there's stuff missing. Flash drives, old meeting notes. She used to keep a separate laptop for administrative duties. We can't find it." Studied his expression. Fear, embarrassment, maybe guilt. "Mind if I take a look around?" He hesitated, then nodded. The air inside still smelled faintly of her perfume, lavender, and something sharp underneath. On the desk sat a stack of half-burned candles, a cracked photo frame of the board members smiling. I opened drawers, flipped through binders. Found nothing but routine paperwork until I saw it, a small black notebook, tucked beneath a ledger. Its cover was embossed with gold initials. Kema opened it. Inside were pages of neat handwriting notes on residents. Finds behavioral observations next to my name. She'd written, ambitious, arrogant, needs to be reminded. He doesn't make the rules here. The words felt like a slap. Flipping further, I found Samantha's name, another family she'd targeted, and something stranger, a list titled Future Actions. Next to several addresses were short phrases: property violation photo, insurance update, fire hazard check. My throat went dry. She'd planned more than one fire. I took the notebook straight to the police. The detective who'd handled my case dozed at me in the hallway. "You again," he said, half smiling. "Can't stay away from us, huh?" I placed the notebook on his desk. "Read the last section." He flipped through it, eyes narrowing. "You're telling me she planned multiple incidents?" "I'm telling you, she didn't stop with me," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "We'll open an investigation again." By the time I left the station, the sun had set. The parking lot lights flickered against my windshield. I sat there for a while, watching them blink, feeling that old weight return, not grief this time, but purpose. Karen might have lost her freedom, but her shadow was still stretching over people's lives. Weeks passed. The investigation spread quietly. One by one, neighbors came forward, stories of extortion, forged violation letters, hidden fines. It was like peeling wallpaper off a rotten wall. I thought I was done with her. But then came the letter. No return address, just my name typed neatly on the envelope. Inside one line, handwritten, "You didn't win. I always find a way." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. She'd written it before sentencing. Maybe mailed it through someone else. Still, seeing it in my hands sent a chill crawling up my spine. For the first time since the fire, I felt the tremor of fear again. Not because of what she could do from behind bars, but because of what people like her leave behind: followers, believers, enablers. The next HOA election was approaching, and rumors spread that someone wanted to restore Karen's policies. Called themselves the Willow Integrity Group. Harmless name, same poison. I decided I wasn't going to watch another tyrant rise in my own backyard. When the meeting came, the community hall was packed. Faces I hadn't seen since the fire filled the seats, some curious, some angry, some pretending neutrality. I walked in quietly, taking a chair near the back. Gary opened with announcements, then turned to the elections. A tall woman with sharp red nails stood to speak. "Karen made mistakes," she began, "but she cared. She kept this place safe and beautiful. We need that kind of leadership again." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I stood. The room fell silent. "You want beauty?" I said. "Look outside. The lawns, the trees, they survived without her." "You want safety?" "Ask the families," she threatened. "House." The woman crossed her arms. "With all due respect, Judge, you're still bitter about your house." "Bitter?" I stepped forward. "I'm alive because she failed to plan her crime properly. Others might not be so lucky next time." Someone clapped. Then another. The murmurs shifted, turning. The red-nailed woman's smile faltered. I didn't need to say more. Sometimes truth only needs one spark to catch. The vote ended in silence. The integrity group dissolved within a week. After that night, the neighborhood slowly thawed. Kids played outside again. Mailboxes filled. People waved. It wasn't perfect, but it was human. Months later, I visited the prison. Not for closure, exactly, more for confirmation that she was really real, not just a ghost haunting my property lines. They led me to the visiting area. She was already sitting there, hands folded neatly, eyes bright. "Well," she said, smiling faintly, "if it isn't my favorite judge." I sat down. "You wrote me a letter." Her smile didn't fade. "You always were perceptive. Why?" She tilted her head. "Because you took everything from me. My home, my reputation. You think a few years will change that?" I studied her. The arrogance hadn't died. It had just adapted. "You burned my house down," I said quietly. "But you didn't break me. That's the part you'll never understand." For the first time, her eyes flickered just for a second. Then she laughed, low and cold. "We'll see." I stood. "Enjoy your sentence, Karen. I'll make sure the neighborhood stays exactly how you hated it, free." For the first time, Her eyes flickered just for a second. Then she laughed low and cold. "We'll see." I stood. "Enjoy your sentence, Karen? I'll make sure the neighborhood stays exactly how you hated it free." As I walked out, the guard at the door nodded. "You okay, Judge?" I took a breath. Better than I've been in years. Outside, rain began to fall, light, steady, harmless. I let it hit my face. For the first time, the smell of smoke didn't follow it. If you're still watching, maybe you've met a Karen of your own. Maybe not someone who lights fires, but someone who smiles while taking pieces of your peace, your confidence, your joy. People like that thrive when you stay quiet. So, stand up, speak, rebuild. Because when you do, their power turns to ash. And if stories like this remind you that truth always wins, stick around. There's another one coming. And you won't believe how the next HOA tried to twist the rules until karma flipped the script entirely. Hit that subscribe button, stay till the end, and remember, justice may be slow, but it never forgets. Asterisk, I used to think justice felt like peace. That once the gavel fell, everything inside you would quiet down, like a storm finally breaking. But that's not what happened when Karen's sentence came through. When the bailiff let her out in handcuffs, head bowed, the courtroom silent, I didn't feel peace. I felt empty. I remember the echo of her heels as she walked past the defense table, her perfect posture still intact. Even in chains, Karen carried herself like she owned the place. For a second, she lifted her head, met my eyes, and smiled. That same polished, soulless smile she wore the night my house burned. It chilled me more than any fire could. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Cameras flashed. Reporters yelled questions. "Judge, what's your comment on the verdict? Was it personal? Do you think the HOA system needs reform?" I didn't answer any of them. How could I explain that justice and relief aren't the same thing? That night, I drove home, meaning a temporary apartment, one room and a kitchenette. My life, once filled with the smell of coffee and the sound of my wife's laughter, now reduced to silence and takeout containers. I stood by the window watching headlights drift past and wondered if Karen felt the same emptiness I did. Somehow I doubted it. The footage that exposed her still haunted me. Her voice sharp and commanding, giving orders to make sure the judge learns his place. The arson wasn't random. It was her twisted idea of balance. She couldn't stand losing control. When the board turned on her, when her fake empire began to crumble, she chose destruction. It wasn't about me. It was about her power. About reminding everyone what happened when they defied her. Weeks passed after her conviction. People stopped whispering my name with pity and started using it with respect again. Some even called me a hero, though I never wanted that. The HOA disbanded. Willow Creek Estates went silent. Houses that once gleamed under her inspection now showed signs of life paint colors she would have hated. Kids' bikes left on lawns, wind chimes ringing freely. But for me it was harder. The smell of smoke clung to my mind. Every creak at night made me sit up, heart racing. I could sentence criminals every day, but I couldn't sentence my own memories. Then one morning I received a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in looping cursive. Inside, one sentence. You may have one, but you'll never forget me. No signature. But I didn't need one. I folded the paper and set it on the counter. I didn't feel fear. Not anymore. Just pity. Because even behind bars, she still needed to feel powerful. That was her prison long before steel bars surrounded her. A few months later, I finally visited the plot of land where my home once stood. The grass had grown wild, soft and green. I knelt down and ran my fingers through the soil. It was blackened, still in spots, but new life pushed through tiny blades, defiant, refusing to stay buried. That's when I understood something I'd missed all along. Revenge doesn't rebuild. Justice does. But it only brings peace when you let go of the ashes. I decided to rebuild. Not the same house, not the same memories. Something new. Something free from her shadow. The neighbors helped. People I barely knew showed up with tools, paint, lumber. It wasn't pity, it was solidarity. Every hammer hit was a reminder that Karen didn't win. That she could burn a building, but not a community. When the new foundation was finally poured, I stood there in the evening light, breathing in the smell of fresh concrete. It didn't erase the pain, but it grounded me. It felt solid, real. As I looked over the property, I imagined the old oak table, the books, the laughter. Not with sadness anymore, but gratitude. Those moments existed once, and they taught me how strong I could be when everything else fell apart. Weeks later, I got a call from the district attorney. "You should know," he said quietly. "Karen's appealing her sentence. Claims it was all a misunderstanding." I laughed. A short, tired laugh. "Let her," I said. Some people never change their script, but deep down, I knew something she didn't. Her real punishment wasn't prison. It was irrelevance. The moment people stopped fearing her, she lost everything she ever valued. The night before her appeal hearing, I sat on the porch of my unfinished home, watching the stars. The sky was clear, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. My phone buzzed messages from people who'd watched the trial online. Strangers. Some told me they'd been through the same thing. That they too had their own Karen who tried to destroy their peace. Their words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe this story wasn't just mine. Maybe it was a reminder that sometimes evil hides behind good manners. And justice doesn't come with applause, it comes with scars. When the hearing day arrived, I walked into court not as the victim, not even as the judge, but as a man who finally understood closure. She looked smaller this time. Her hair no longer perfect, her hands trembling slightly. She avoided my eyes. That fake politeness she wore like armor was gone. Her lawyer argued. Her voice cracked. The evidence stood unshaken. The appeal was denied. The judge, a colleague I trusted, read the ruling with finality. Karen slumped, her shoulders caving in, her world collapsing in silence. As she was let out again, she glanced at me one last time. No smile this time. Just a flicker of realization. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't need to. After the court adjourned, I stepped outside and took a long breath. The world was still loud, cars honking, people rushing, but inside, everything was quiet. I walked to my car, paused, and looked back at the courthouse steps. I thought of all the people who'd walked in and out of those doors, carrying their pain, their hopes for justice. And I realized justice isn't about erasing pain. It's about reclaiming your voice after someone tries to silence it. I turned on the ignition, the radio humming softly. A slow smile crept across my face. Not of victory, but peace. Sometimes, closure doesn't come with fire or punishment. Sometimes, it's just standing in the ashes, breathing, and realizing you survived. If you're still here, still listening, remember this. You can rebuild. Even when they burn it all down, even when they think they've won, you can start again, stronger, smarter, freer. And if this story hit something in you, if you've ever faced someone like her, someone who smiled while setting fire to your peace, stay with us. There are more stories, more truths to uncover. Because out there, every quiet neighborhood hides another secret war. And every time someone stands up to people like Karen, justice breathes again. So don't go just yet. Hit that subscribe button, not for me, but for every person who ever stood in the smoke and refused to fall. Because sometimes, the only way to put out a fire is to light your own path forward.